If you can't afford better, maybe this isn't the place for you." She didn't say it loudly, but just loud enough for the table next to him to hear. Her tone was flat, eyes scanning his worn-out boots and frayed jacket like she was taking out the trash. The black man didn't respond. He simply nudged the plate of pasta slightly to the side, revealing a faint patch of green mold on the toast beside it, half hidden under the dim golden light. It was a chilly afternoon on the outskirts of Atlanta, the kind of restaurant where old jazz trickled through dusty ceiling speakers, and the yellow-tinted lights made everything look like a faded memory. Outside, it was around 48 degrees Fahrenheit. A cold wind whispered through the door as a man stepped in unnoticed. He wore a faded khaki jacket, jeans that had seen years, and Timberland boots dulled by time. Nothing about him screamed important. He chose a corner table where the light barely touched the edges of the menu. A waiter approached, scanned him head to toe, and then turned away, muttering something about needing to check on an order in the back. Minutes passed. No one came. Eventually, a young blonde waitress approached with a face full of disdain. No smile, no greeting. "Just need something." He looked up, calmly. Just a regular meal, something warm. She rolled her eyes and walked off. 10 minutes later, a plate was slapped down in front of him with a clatter. The sauce was runny. The smell slightly off. He tilted his head. There at the edge of the plate, a sliver of bread, soft with mold. Still, he didn't react. He didn't call for a manager. Didn't leave. He picked up a fork, cut a small piece, and then set it down. That was enough. The waitress returned to pour water, glancing at the untouched plate. "Something wrong?" Or, "You're not hungry after all." Her laugh was thin, eyes cold, still. He said nothing. He simply pushed the plate farther away. The breeze from the cracked door brushed the back of his neck. Somewhere near the bar, someone chuckled. No one in that restaurant knew. The man they just humiliated was the largest silent investor in the entire restaurant chain. No one knew. 15 years ago, he used to wash dishes in the very kitchen behind those walls. And most importantly, no one noticed. The old line cook, frozen mid-step eyes locked on the man's face, before slowly turning away. A glance that lingered, a nod so subtle it could be mistaken for nothing. Only those who've seen greatness rise from silence bow their heads like that. But to understand why this man remained silent, why he swallowed that moment, we need to go back a few hours earlier to the kitchen, where someone began to sense something was off. A glance that lingered, a nod so subtle it could be mistaken for nothing. Only those who've seen greatness rise from silence bow their heads like that. But to understand why this man remained silent, why he swallowed that moment, we need to go back a few hours earlier to the kitchen, where something stirred beneath the surface. His name was Luis, 62. Puerto Rican, been chopping onions in that same kitchen for 23 years. Never spoke unless he had to. Knew every rusted pan, every loose tile beneath the prep line. And that morning, something was off. The order ticket came through like any other walk-in. One lunch special, corner table, nothing odd on paper. But when he peeked through the small service window and saw the man, he froze. The face was older now, beard speckled with gray, but the eyes, those eyes were the same ones that used to scrub grease off the floor beside him. "Is that?" he whispered under his breath. No one heard him. Not that they would have cared. Luis kept quiet, kept chopping, but his hands weren't steady. He knew that man. And if it really was him, what the hell was he doing here, dressed like that, sitting alone? He glanced at the line manager, Greg, a 30-something with slicked back hair and zero humility. Greg was barking at a waitress for being 40 seconds late to grab a tray. The same waitress who would, an hour later, serve a moldy dish with a side of attitude. Luis didn't say anything. Not yet. But he started watching. From the kitchen. He saw the way the man was ignored. He saw how the young hostess rolled her eyes when she finally approached. He saw the plate come back, untouched. Luis wiped his hands and stepped into the cooler, pretending to fetch something. But really, he needed a minute. That man, if it really was him, had once worked 2 shifts back-to-back in this kitchen. Used to sleep in his car behind the alley. He never raised his voice, never begged for favors. Just showed up, every damn day. Until one morning, he was gone. No one knew where he went. Rumors flew jail, hospital, dead, or maybe finally gave up. But now, he was sitting at table 14 staring at a plate of ruined food and saying nothing. Luis came out of the cooler and walked past the service window again. The man hadn't moved, just kept his hands folded, eyes lowered, like he was waiting for something no one else could see. Then a strange thing happened. Greg strutted past and muttered under his breath, loud enough for the kitchen to hear, "If he's looking for handouts, he picked the wrong place." Luis clenched his jaw. This wasn't right. Not the silence, not the disrespect. Not when that man had once cleaned the very floor Greg now walked on like he owned it. He reached for a clean towel and started wiping down the prep station, but his eyes kept drifting toward the dining area. And for the first time in over 2 decades, Luis felt something he hadn't felt since his early days in that kitchen, a sense of anticipation. Like something someone was about to remind this place who really built it. A whisper in the kitchen, a memory too vivid to ignore, and a man watching from the shadows, knowing more than he let on. But to understand what this restaurant really meant to that quiet man at table 14, we need to hear what others once said about him back when no one knew his name. Back when he was just the guy who never left and never broke. A whisper in the kitchen, a memory too vivid to ignore, and a man watching from the shadows, knowing more than he let on. But to understand what this restaurant really meant to that quiet man at table 14, we need to hear what others once said about him back when he was just another face in the back of the kitchen, just another guy who never left and never broke. His name wasn't even Tyler back then. People called him T or Big T, or sometimes just Yo, man. He didn't correct them. Never talked much anyway. Samantha, one of the former waitresses, used to joke dudes like a damn shadow. Always there, always quiet. Kinda spooky if you ask me. But the truth was, T was invisible because people chose not to look. Back in those days, this was around 2008, the kitchen ran hotter than hell, grease burned through shoes, and tempers exploded daily. T never exploded, he just worked. Raymond, the old line cook who trained T his first week, remembered one thing most. He showed up every single morning at 5 a.m., even when no one asked, even when we were closed after the storm. Just sat outside with a notebook and a coffee, like he was waiting for life to open its damn doors again. People thought he was weird, too quiet, too polite, too focused. Some thought he was hiding something. Others thought he was slow. One manager, a guy named Bill, actually said, "I don't think he gets it. Man, I told him once he wasn't cut out for this place. Thought he'd quit the next day." He didn't. Instead, he stayed later, cleaned deeper, learned faster. But he never smiled. And that's what made people uneasy. It's not that he was angry. It's that he wasn't trying to be liked. There was one guy, Marcus dishwasher turned part-time prep. He and T shared the same overnight shift for a few weeks. One night, while they were breaking down the fryer, Marcus asked him straight up, "You got a plan or something?" Or you just like Payne T didn't look up. He just said, I'm watching how this place works. That was it. Not a joke. Not a flex. Just the truth. And then one day he was gone. No goodbye. No notice. He'd saved up just enough to vanish without leaving a trace. Most assumed he'd finally burned out, maybe got arrested, or just cracked. Samantha shrugged it off. He was sweet but weird. You know those types, quiet ones, never last. But 2 years later, a rumor floated back through a vendor who stopped by the kitchen. Said a silent partner had started buying into small restaurants. Said his LLC had weird initials, something like TLR. Holdings. Said he only invested in places where he once worked. No one made the connection. No one thought the guy who once slept behind the dumpsters would become the man signing their paychecks from a distance. That is, until Luis saw him again. Same eyes, same silence, same reason he didn't say a word when served moldy food. He wasn't here for revenge. He wasn't here to brag. He was watching, and every person who ever spoke his name like it meant nothing was about to find out what it really meant to be underestimated. Some names are forgotten by choice. Others are erased because no one believed they mattered. But before anyone knew what he would become, they had to know what he came from. The bruises, the hunger, the long nights that didn't end. Because the road to silence often starts in pain. Some names are forgotten by choice. Others are erased because no one believed they mattered. But before anyone knew what he would become, they had to know what he came from. The bruises, the hunger, the long nights that didn't end, because the road to silence often starts in pain. He was 10 years old the first time he was called boy in public. Not the kind of boy that comes with affection. The kind you spit at someone when you're handing them a broom. It was summer. Atlanta heat clung to skin like glue. He'd followed his mother to her second job, a diner off Old National Highway. Small, loud, sweaty, full of customers who didn't look like him. The manager made it clear he can sit in the back, but if he touches anything, he's out. He did sit in the back until his mom, overwhelmed, handed him a rag to help wipe tables. He was small, but careful. Polished each table twice. That's when the man with the cigar yelled across the room, "Hey, I don't want no dirty little boy touching where I eat." No one defended him. Not even his mother, who kept her eyes on the floor, knuckles white on the tray. That was the first time he felt it. The sting. The invisible rope tightening around his voice. He didn't speak for the rest of the night. Middle school wasn't kinder. He was smart, too smart. Finished classwork early, stayed quiet, asked questions teachers couldn't answer. Instead of praise, he got detentions. Trying to show off, "Why don't you slow down for the others? You people always think you know everything." You people? He heard that a lot. It came in whispers, smirks, and sudden group projects where no one picked him. Came in guidance counselors who never remembered his name. Came in scholarship applications that mysteriously got lost. He stopped raising his hand. Stopped bringing lunch. Stopped talking. Silence became easier than rejection. At 16, he was working night's dish pit at a highway rest stop diner. Same smell of grease, same flickering lights. He cleaned with headphones in, music off, not to escape, but to listen. One night, the line cook forgot he was there and joked, "If I had $1 for every black kid who thinks they're going to be CEO, I'd be rich enough to buy this dump." He didn't flinch, just scrubbed harder. That line stayed with him. At 18, he lost his mother. Cardiac arrest in a double shift, no health insurance, no backup plan. The manager called him at work. "Hey, your mom collapsed. They took her away." That was it. No ride, no sympathy. Just another Thursday. He took the bus to the hospital, sat in the hallway alone, signed papers he didn't understand. Went back to work the next day. When a coworker asked why, He said she wouldn't want me to miss my shift. But that wasn't the reason. He couldn't afford to stop. Grief was a luxury. In every crack of his life, there was a silence not empty, but compressed, like a spring winding tighter with every insult, loss, and look that said, "You'll never be more than this." But he kept going, because pain, when buried deep enough, doesn't break you. It builds you, quietly, relentlessly, without anyone noticing. Not all scars are visible. Some live in the pauses between words, in the way someone folds their napkin too neatly, in the way a man smiles without showing teeth. But the thing about pain is that it can teach you how to survive. And survival over time becomes a form of power, power he would carry with him into the fire. Not all scars are visible. Some live in the pauses between words, in the way someone folds their napkin too neatly, in the way a man smiles without showing teeth. But the thing about pain is that it can teach you how to survive. And survival over time becomes a form of power, power he would carry with him into the fire. The fire started small, a closing shift, an argument over tips. Then a fryer flared, oil hit flame, and in under a minute, the whole back kitchen lit up like a matchbook. People ran, screamed, managers ducked, servers dropped trays. One cook even locked himself in the walk-in. But T, he didn't run. He grabbed a soaked apron, wrapped his hands, and pulled the gas line shut. Then he dragged 2 crates to block the flames from reaching the prep line. Then he opened the back door and got 3 people out through the alley before smoke filled the kitchen. No one noticed. The fire department showed up. Cameras flashed. The manager blamed a faulty timer. But when the insurance report came back, there was a handwritten note from a firefighter. Whoever shut the gas line saved this place. Whoever moved those crates, smart. He didn't sign his name. But that's who you thank. No one asked who it was. T was already gone. The fire was metaphorical, too. It burned through his 20s every job that wouldn't promote him, every handshake that didn't come, every "we'll call you" that never did. But he kept stacking, kept learning. Dishwasher became line cook. Line cook became shift lead, though they refused to change the title. He built systems in his head, remembered numbers like blueprints. When a friend showed him how to register an LLC, he asked only one question: "How do I hide my name?" The friend laughed. Planning to blow up T didn't smile. "I plan to build something no one sees coming." At 31, he bought his first steak a failing soul food diner near Decatur. He didn't change the menu, didn't fire staff, just fixed the margins, optimized delivery, and redesigned the kitchen flow from memory. Within a year, it was profitable. Within 2, he sold it at 3 times value but stayed anonymous. He repeated that, again and again, never spoke to press, never took interviews, just signed paperwork under TLR Holdings. No one looked further, because no one thought a quiet black man with no college degree could own anything. That's how he liked it. He didn't crave the spotlight. He craved leverage. Silence gave him that. Discomfort gave him clarity. He once turned down a magazine cover that wanted to call him the comeback king. He told them, "I didn't come back. I was never invited." Behind the scenes, his name started to pop up in boardrooms. Whispers. Who's backing this chain? Some investor from Atlanta? Ghost Capital? Never shows up. And then one day, he did show up. Not in a suit, not for attention, just to sit in one of his restaurants and watch. And when they served him moldy food, he didn't flinch, because fire never burns the same way twice. Some people rise by being loud. Others rise by listening, by enduring, by collecting every silent moment and turning it into motion. But when those who've risen return to the places they once crawled through, they don't come back for applause. They come back to test the world that once tested them. And that's exactly when the disrespect began again. Some people rise by being loud. Others rise by listening, by enduring, by collecting every silent moment and turning it into motion. But when those who've risen return to the places they once crawled through, they don't come back for applause. They come back to test the world that once tested them. And that's exactly when the disrespect began again. It was supposed to be a routine quality check. He didn't announce his visit. Never did. That was the point. He believed in watching people when they thought no one was watching them. He walked in just before lunch rush, dressed like any other tired man on a Thursday khakis, a windbreaker, no name tag, no flash. The hostess didn't even look up when he entered. "Two or just you?" she asked, barely glancing up. "Just me," he replied. "Bar's that way. We're a little full." He looked around. The restaurant was half empty, but he said nothing. He took the bar seat. The bartender didn't smile, didn't ask if he'd been there before, just slid a menu across the counter like a bill someone didn't want to pay. T opened it. Half the items were misprinted. One had a typo so obvious it looked like a joke. "Do you recommend anything the bartender didn't look up?" "I don't know. Man, it's lunch. Just pick something." No eye contact. No service. T nodded once, then closed the menu. Burger. Medium. No pickles. The bartender walked off without a word. 15 minutes passed. He watched the staff, how they handled plates, how they handled people. One server laughed behind a guest's back. The manager on duty leaned against a post, scrolling through Instagram. And then, a voice behind the line. "You see the guy at the bar?" "Yeah." "What about him? I swear he's been to 3 locations this week. Think he's a food blogger or something. Looks like someone's uncle. Probably just broke." Laughter, not loud, but sharp. T didn't move, didn't turn around, didn't blink. The burger came out late, the bun cold, the fries limp. T took one bite. No salt. Dry patty. He pushed the plate forward, folded his napkin with precision, and rested his elbows on the counter. The bartender noticed. Finally. "Problem with the food?" T paused. "No. Everything's fine." He smiled. But it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile you give when someone's about to fail a test they didn't study for. The bartender nodded, walked off, never checked back. Before he left, the manager strolled by, chewing gum, didn't greet him, didn't ask if he enjoyed his meal. Instead, he made a joke to the hostess on his way past. "Can't wait for these Yelp types to disappear. Think a burger makes them a critic?" They laughed. T stood up slowly, pulled out a worn leather wallet, left a 50 on the counter, more than double the bill. Then he looked up at the ceiling, where a cracked light flickered above the bar. That flicker was the first signal. Something inside him had just clicked. Some insults are loud, others are quiet enough to echo. He had built this place, line by line, brick by contract, and yet here he was invisible again. But when disrespect returns a second time, it doesn't sting, it strikes, and it always demands a second look. Some insults are loud, others are quiet enough to echo. He had built this place, line by line, brick by contract, and yet here he was invisible again. But when disrespect returns a second time, it doesn't sting, it strikes, and it always demands a second look. 2 days later, he walked into another branch. Different city, different staff, same chain, his chain, same routine, same clothes. Nothing about him screamed wealth or power. He sat at a booth near the back, not the corner this time. close enough to hear, but far enough to be ignored. It was quieter here, more upscale, everything polished on the surface. A manager walked past, glanced once, didn't stop. A waiter walked by twice, both times without speaking. Finally, a young trainee approached, nervous but polite. "Would you like a menu?" "Sir," he nodded. "Water first?" "Then yes." The trainee smiled, walked off. But before he returned, the original waiter came over annoyed. "Hey, did someone already take your order?" "No. Well, we've got a reservation for this booth in 10. You might want to move up front." The man looked around. No signs, no hostess explanation, no reason. Still, he moved, didn't argue, just shifted to a table near the door. Minutes passed. The same waiter served a couple behind him, full menu. Full smile. When he brought T's water, he didn't even look at him. "You ready?" "Not yet," T replied, setting the menu down slowly. The waiter sighed. "Let me know when you are." He walked away, but not before muttering, "Don't sit in prime booths if you ain't got prime spending." T heard it. So did the trainee. Their eyes met just for a moment, and in that second, something silent passed between them. The trainee looked down, ashamed, not of T, but of the place they worked. T ordered anyway. Salmon, no butter, asparagus, extra chard, a simple request. What arrived? Dry chicken, soggy greens, cold rice. He didn't complain, didn't send it back. He placed his napkin over the plate, took a sip of water, and waited. Waited for the check. Waited for the silence to fill the room the way it always did when people assumed too much, too fast. By the time he left, no one had asked if he enjoyed the meal. No one said goodbye. But the trainee. He followed him to the door. I think I know who you are," he said quietly. T turned, looked him in the eyes, calm. "Even, do you—" The trainee swallowed. "My uncle used to work at one of your kitchens. Said there was a guy who never talked. Just fixed things." T nodded once. "That sounds like someone else." Then he pushed the door open and stepped into the wind. He didn't need to explain himself, didn't need validation, but deep inside, something was shifting. Not just disappointment, not just disrespect. It was pattern, and patterns to him meant data, and data meant time to act. Twice might be a coincidence, but 3 times. That's not culture. That's system. And when the system forgets who built it, sometimes the architect has to remind them, twice might be a coincidence, but 3 times, that's not culture. That's system. And when the system forgets who built it, sometimes the architect has to remind them. But Tyler never built to be seen. He built to be invisible by design. No Instagram, no LinkedIn, no articles, no speaking gigs, no interviews. Most CEOs wanted attention. He wanted distance. The fewer people who knew his face, the freer he was to walk among them. He lived in a quiet part of town, gated, but not flashy. Drove a black Ford, not a Bentley. Shopped at local markets. Paid in cash. The man didn't even carry a key fob. He used a manual deadbolt, less signal. He once told his attorney, less noise. He had no wife, no kids, a niece he paid tuition for anonymously, and 3 numbers burned into his mind, 722-1. 7 years since his last photo appeared online, 22 properties under shell companies. One name on every final signature his own. Not even his assistants knew where he'd be week to week. They received instructions through encrypted voice notes, never emails. But why live like that? Why hide? Because exposure meant vulnerability. And Tyler had learned long ago, when people know who you are, they try to shrink you. They put you in a box, label you inspiring or ungrateful or exceptional for a black man. and he didn't want any of it. He walked alone most mornings, headphones in, nothing playing, just listening to the sidewalk, to conversations, to tone. He could tell more about a place from how the cashier greeted the janitor than any Yelp review. That's how he decided where to invest. Not by pitch decks, by people's small choices. There was a barista in Midtown who called every customer boss, except black men. There was a shoe store manager who spoke slower when speaking to immigrants. There was a dentist's office receptionist who never looked up when saying, "Have a nice day." Tyler noticed them all, not to punish, to understand the pattern of subtle violence that lived in plain sight. He didn't journal. He annotated life, sticky notes in drawers, voice memos with no names, receipts with phrases circled like clues in a case he never submitted. But underneath that precision, there was still a wound, one he didn't talk about, didn't name. But it showed in how long he stayed silent when someone disrespected him. Not because he was afraid, because he was measuring them, testing how far someone would go before realizing they'd misread everything. His life was not about revenge. It was about positioning. Power wasn't about shouting. It was about choosing when to speak and who hears it, and when to make silence louder than any outburst. So when a waitress rolled her eyes, when a manager laughed behind his back, when staff whispered, probably broke, they didn't realize the man they mocked had signed off on their job applications, had approved their store budgets, had seen their faces before, in spreadsheets, not hallways, and he had chosen not to act. Yet. Some people hide because they're scared, others hide because they're building. But every fortress has a hidden entrance, and sometimes the smallest crack, the slightest clue can reveal a kingdom behind a mask. That clue was about to surface. Some people hide because they're scared. Others hide because they're building. But every fortress has a hidden entrance. And sometimes, the smallest crack, the slightest clue can reveal a kingdom behind a mask. That clue was about to surface. It happened at a third location, downtown, sleek, crowded, the kind of place where people wear suits to brunch. Tyler walked in just past 11, no reservation. Wore the same clothes, pressed this time, but still plain. He was seated by a hostess who didn't look up once. The table was clean, the service delayed. But this time, someone noticed. His waiter was a young black man named Derek. Second week on the job, still learning the system, he walked up with a forced smile and a tablet in his hand. "Welcome in, sir. What can I get you started with today?" Tyler looked at him calm. Even, "Just water. Give me a second with the menu." Derek nodded, turned, then froze. Something about the man's voice, low, but centered, like someone used to being listened to, even in silence. Back at the station, Derek whispered to another server. "Yo, that dude at 17, what about him? I don't know. Something about him feels different. Different, how, like he's watching us." They laughed it off, but Derek couldn't shake the feeling. When he brought the water, he glanced again. The man's posture. The way he scanned the room without seeming to. The way he tapped the corner of the table twice before sipping. Military detective, or something else. Derek looked down at the man's hand as he reached for the glass. And that's when he saw it. A ring, simple, matte black, no diamonds, no shine, but engraved along the inner edge, just visible under the light TLR, Unit 11. It meant nothing to most, but Derek had interned in finance for one summer. He remembered something, an offhand comment from a recruiter. "You know TLR Holdings? No one knows who runs it. They say Unit 11 is their original acquisition group, like OG Silent Partners." It couldn't be. No way this man was connected to that. Not here. Not like this. Later. During break. Derek Googled TLR Unit 11 on his phone. Nothing. Just vague business articles and a few real estate whispers. But the logo looked almost like the one on the man's ring. Not exact, but close. Close enough to wonder. When Tyler asked for the check, Derek didn't hesitate. I got you. Sir, no rush. Tyler looked up for the first time directly at him. Eyes steady, not unkind, just assessing. Thanks. Derek nodded, walked away, heart pounding. He didn't know who this man was. But he knew one thing. This was not just some regular customer. The moment Derek walked into the kitchen, he went straight to the shift lead. Hey, do we comp VIPs without telling the manager? The lead raised an eyebrow. What? VIP table 17. Dude in the windbreaker. Yeah. No. Why, Derek paused. No reason. Just his vibe. The shift lead laughed. Man, you've been watching too much Netflix. But later that day, that same lead would walk past the bar and see Tyler staring at the floor plan on the wall like he'd built it himself. Suspicion doesn't always come with proof. Sometimes it comes with energy, a look, a word, a logo no one else would notice, and the beginning of a theory no one's ready to test. Recognition doesn't always require confirmation. Sometimes your gut speaks before your mind can catch up. And once a whisper starts, especially inside the walls of a system built on assumption, it only takes one more spark to light a fire. That spark was coming. Recognition doesn't always require confirmation. Sometimes your gut speaks before your mind can catch up. And once a whisper starts, especially inside the walls of a system built on assumption, it only takes one more spark to light a fire. That spark was coming. Her name was Carla, general manager at the West End location. Late 30s, sharp, efficient, never late, never loud. She'd been with the company for 5 years and never once missed a quarterly report. People liked her because she got things done but didn't care if you liked her. She read body language better than most, and what she saw that Friday afternoon made her stop mid-step. A man in a tan jacket, sitting alone, table 3. Didn't ask for a waiter, just waited. Didn't complain when the food was late. Didn't ask for the manager when his fries came out cold. But what made Carla pause wasn't what he said. It was how he watched. He didn't fidget with his phone, didn't glance at the clock. He scanned the floor, the back line, the bar, and then once their monthly P&L sheet lying near the host stand. Just a glance. But he'd read the margins. No normal guest did that. She tilted her head. Something tugged at her memory. Back in the office, she pulled up the regional emails. Nothing about a corporate visit. No alerts. No audits. Still, she opened the shared investor deck, scrolled past the summary, stopped at a name, TLR Holdings, Tier 1 partner. There was no photo, no biography, just a logo, matte black, minimal font. Her eyes narrowed. She had seen that logo before, somewhere not on paper. She pulled out her phone and searched TLR Holdings Plus Ring Plus Investor Group, nothing clear. Then she typed TLR Unit 11, still vague. But one result mentioned a founder who occasionally visits locations anonymously to observe brand fidelity. No name, no face, but the language, brand fidelity. That was exactly what the man at table 3 was doing. Carla closed the tab, stood up, walked back to the floor. The man was still there now, sipping from a water glass, folded napkin beside his untouched plate. She stepped up to the table, professional smile on. Everything all right, sir? He looked up slowly. His eyes didn't blink, didn't challenge, just waited. Yes, he said. Everything's fine. Pause. She nodded, but didn't leave. Instead, she glanced at the ring on his finger, matte black, worn at the edges. Her breath caught, just slightly. That logo, that ring. Him. She cleared her throat. Well, if you need anything at all, I'm the GM on site. Thanks, he replied. Appreciate it. His voice was calm, almost kind, but something behind it told her he knew she knew. And still, he let her walk away. Back in the office, Carla didn't sit. She stood at the window, watching. One of her servers came in. Everything cool. She turned slowly. Yeah, just what she paused. Just wondering how many people we've served without knowing who they were. The server laughed. VIP mystery shoppers. Carla didn't laugh back. No, bigger than that. For the rest of the shift, she moved differently, checked the bathrooms twice, watched her staff's tone, even helped bus a table herself, because suddenly, everything felt like a test. And the grade was coming, not in paper, not in email, in person. From a man no one had recognized until now. Shock doesn't always come with sound. Sometimes, it arrives in the space between one glance and the next. But once one person sees the truth, it becomes harder for everyone else to keep pretending. And those who mocked before, they were about to feel the weight shift. Shock doesn't always come with sound. Sometimes, it arrives in the space between one glance and the next. But once one person sees the truth, it becomes harder for everyone else to keep pretending. And those who mocked before, they were about to feel the weight shift. The energy changed before the truth did. It started with glances. The bartender at the second location, the one who'd rolled his eyes and dropped the burger like trash, saw the GM walk by with a clipboard and tighter posture than usual. She didn't say a word, just nodded toward table 6, then looked back. Twice. Greg, the shift manager, whispered, "Why's Carla babysitting one guy?" Another server shrugged. Dude must have complained. Greg scoffed. No one complains quietly. Look at him. He's not a threat. But the moment he said it, something cracked. Because the man at table 6 wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't people watching. He was watching them. And suddenly, Greg felt exposed. Back in the kitchen, a line cook asked, "Yo, who's the guy outside that Carla keeps hovering near the dishwasher?" Replied, "Some investor, maybe. He left a $50 tip last time he came in for a cold burger." Why? No idea. Didn't say a word, just looked through you. In denial, people get loud. Greg stormed into the back and barked, "Everyone tighten up. I don't care if he's a food blogger or Oprah's cousin. We're not letting Yelp destroy another location." But his voice cracked halfway through, because somewhere deep inside, he'd already lost control. Carla said nothing. She didn't need to. She just kept moving like a quiet metronome, checking silverware, nodding to hosts, speaking softer than usual. The quieter she got, the more nervous they became. At one point, the bartender approached the table. "Would you, like anything else, dessert?" On the house, Tyler looked up. "No, thank you." The bartender nodded quickly, backing away like a man who realized he might have insulted a judge in a courtroom. Later, the waiter who'd made the prime booth comment saw the same man standing near the front window, alone, still. Something about the way he stood straight, centered, not leaning, made the server stop cold. He turned to Greg. "Hey, man, I think we messed up." Greg rolled his eyes. With what being too slow? "No, I think he's someone." Denial comes in two forms, jokes and silence. Greg tried both. First, he joked, "If he's an investor, why dress like that?" Then, he said nothing for the next 30 minutes, just stared at the check-in app, and didn't notice a single new table. Outside, Tyler stood still, not angry, not smug, just measuring, watching the panic ripple through people who thought he was no one, people who had spoken too quickly, served too poorly, laughed too easily. Because disrespect doesn't require violence. Sometimes, it just needs the weight of your silence and the fear people create in themselves when they realize they might have underestimated the wrong man. The truth doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just stands there. And when fear replaces arrogance, apologies come slower than silence. But Tyler wasn't looking for apologies. He was waiting for something to break. The truth doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just stands there. And when fear replaces arrogance, apologies come slower than silence. But Tyler wasn't looking for apologies. He was waiting for something to break. It started with an email, a routine scheduling alert sent to every regional manager, including Carla, subject line confidential Tyler R., to visit locations this week, maintain operational integrity. She froze. Tyler R. She hadn't heard anyone say his full name before. She'd only seen the initials, the ring, and now it was right there, black and white, unmistakable. The man who'd been sitting in her restaurant, watching, quiet. She didn't tell anyone. Just forward flagged the email and stepped back onto the floor. Tyler was still there, still drinking water, still folding his napkin neatly the same way every time. This time, Carla walked to the manager's station and whispered to Greg, "I need you to do two things. 1, don't talk. 2, look at this." She showed him the email. His face turned the color of his apron. That's him." She nodded, didn't speak. Greg slowly turned his head toward table 6, then back to Carla. I think I told him to move tables last time." She didn't reply. Didn't need to. The air had already changed. Then came the next blow. A man in a suit, crisp navy, earpiece, leather portfolio walked in through the front door. Didn't speak to the host. Didn't wait to be seated. He walked directly toward Tyler and said one sentence, "Your 2:30 is ready if you'd like to proceed." Tyler nodded once, took his coat off the back of the chair, stood, and the entire front of the restaurant paused. The bartender dropped a spoon. A server mid-laugh stopped with her mouth open. The cook behind the line leaned too far forward and burned a hand. No one said anything. They just watched as the man they'd dismissed, ignored, almost mocked, walked out the front door, flanked by a professional escort, and slid into the back seat of a black Lincoln SUV. Carla exhaled slowly, then turned to Greg. "Go pull every staff report from the last 3 months. Why? Because I want to know who was working every time he came in, and what they did." Greg didn't argue, didn't joke, just left. Back in the kitchen, the silence was louder than the sizzle of the grill. Someone whispered, "Wait, that was him. Like him." No one answered. No one could. The tension didn't snap. It stretched across every station, every table, every word unspoken, the kind of tension that says we were just tested, and we failed. Later that night, a customer posted a video on TikTok, just 7 seconds. No caption. It showed Tyler walking out, followed by the man in the navy suit, followed by silence. In the comments, "Wait, That's Tyler R. Bro was eating cold fries while owning the building. This the calmest power move I've ever seen. The video went viral, and for the first time, the staff saw their own faces from the outside. Confused, awkward, ashamed. Truth doesn't explode. It settles, like dust after a detonation covering everything, making even familiar places feel foreign, because now they knew. He was never just some guy. He was the reason their paychecks cleared, the reason they wore that uniform, the reason that place existed. And they had treated him like nothing. Some truths don't need to be shouted. They just walk out the door, leaving silence in their place. But silence isn't empty. It's filled with reflection, with shame, with the sting of being wrong out loud. And now, it was time for everyone else to catch up to what Tyler had always known. Some truths don't need to be shouted. They just walk out the door, leaving silence in their place. But silence isn't empty. It's filled with reflection, with shame, with the sting of being wrong out loud. And now, it was time for everyone else to catch up to what Tyler had always known. 3 days later, it was no longer a rumor. The company sent out an official internal bulletin. Subject acknowledgement and appreciation, Mr. Tyler R., founding partner. It was short, just 142 words. But it included something no one had seen before. A photo. Grayscale. Half-lit. Tyler in a black collared shirt, sitting on a rooftop ledge, city behind him. Eyes forward, calm, familiar. The same man they had served, dismissed, doubted, over and over again. The email hit inboxes like a thunderclap. Greg read it twice, then again, then slowly closed his laptop like maybe the shame wouldn't seep through if he shut it fast enough. The bartender didn't even speak. He just stood at the staff locker, holding his apron in one hand, not sure whether he should put it on or burn it. Meanwhile, Carla printed the bulletin and pinned it on the employee board. No speech, no warning. She just tapped the paper in place and walked away. One by one, staff gathered, read, reread. One server whispered, "We disrespected the guy who signs our paychecks." "No," said another, "worse. We disrespected the man who gave us the job without ever needing to show his face." In the regional office, the executives weren't quiet either. One director asked, "Why didn't he tell us he was visiting?" Another replied, "Because if he did, you would have performed, not revealed." And then, the public piece dropped. A national food industry blog posted a story, "The quiet billionaire behind the chain you eat at and how he tests his teams himself." They didn't name the restaurant, but they posted the photo, the ring, and 3 verified accounts from staff describing how a man who looked like no one walked in and left as someone unforgettable. The internet exploded. Tyler R. trended on Twitter. Comments flooded in. Now that's how you walk in power. Imagine serving your boss cold fries while gossiping about tips. He didn't fire anyone. He let the truth do it. Somewhere far from the noise, Tyler sat in a quiet cafe in Savannah. No security and no driver, no press, just him, his tablet, and a black coffee. He watched the headlines scroll by, watched the numbers surge, then closed the tab, because none of it mattered to him. Not the fame, not the clicks. What mattered was clarity. He had walked through the world as invisible by choice. Now, the world had finally seen him, and not because he shouted, because they couldn't ignore him anymore. But it wasn't the attention that stunned everyone. It was the contrast. They remembered how they'd treated him rushed, rolled eyes, cold meals, no second glances, and then realized they hadn't just failed a customer. They'd failed a man who built the very floor beneath their shoes. At the next staff meeting, Carla stood up front. No slideshow, no script. She just said, "We didn't know who he was, but now that we do, let's not pretend it excuses how we acted." Silence. Then she added, "Because if he wasn't Tyler R., would our behavior have been okay?" More silence. No one had an answer, because the answer was obvious. Some employees quit quietly, some tried to explain, a few just left a note that said, "I get it now." The twist wasn't that he was rich. The twist wasn't that he was the boss. The real twist, he gave them every chance to show who they were, when they thought he was nobody, and they did. Loudly, publicly, without shame, until it was too late. Some twists shake the room, others shatter the mirror. Because when the truth is finally undeniable, it doesn't just reveal one man's identity. It reveals everyone else's. What they saw, what they assumed, what they chose not to question. And now, all that remained was silence. Some twists shake the room, others shatter the mirror. Because when the truth is finally undeniable, it doesn't just reveal one man's identity. It reveals everyone else's. What they saw, what they assumed, what they chose not to question. And now, all that remained was silence. No one wanted to be the first to speak. At the Monday morning meeting, the team sat in the break room, coffees untouched, eyes down. Carla stood at the front not with a speech, but a folder. She laid it flat on the table, inside printouts of every guest review from the past 6 months, every complaint ignored, every note dismissed, every time someone wrote, "I felt like I didn't matter here." And now, they couldn't pretend they didn't know why. Greg finally spoke. Voice flat. Small. I think I told him to move tables. Twice. Carla didn't flinch. No one laughed. No one even looked up. Because this wasn't a joke anymore. "One of the servers," Maya whispered. "I didn't mean to be rude. I just didn't know," another replied, without turning. "But that's the point, right? We only treat people well when we know who they are." That hit different. No one answered. The next customer who walked through the door that day was a young man in a hoodie. AirPods in, no reservation, no flashy watch. He was seated within seconds. Water came fast, menu came faster. The server smiled, because now everyone was wondering, what if he's another Tyler R.? But deeper than that, why weren't we treating people this way before? In the kitchen, Luis, the old cook, said nothing all day. He didn't need to. He'd known. From the first glance, from the weight in Tyler's silence, he just kept working, cleaning, replacing dull knives, fixing the broken timer no one else had noticed. The shame wasn't dramatic. It wasn't screaming or crying or begging. It was quiet. A tray being wiped twice instead of once. A server double-checking an order that normally wouldn't matter. It was in the way people moved slower, more careful, more aware, because they'd been seen, not in anger, but in truth. And that was worse. One staff member quit that afternoon, didn't give notice, just left their uniform and a sticky note. "I've been faking kindness." He didn't deserve that. No one does. Across the chain, stories surfaced. Other employees realizing they had served him. They had ignored him. Some even remembered laughing. The shame rippled through cities, through Slack threads and private messages and 3 voice notes. In one store, a bartender pulled the surveillance footage from Tyler's visit, watched himself throw down a glass too hard, watched himself roll his eyes, then deleted the video. Not to hide it, to stop reliving the moment, but it stayed with him anyway. Tyler never reached out, never replied, never asked for follow-up. He didn't need to, because silence did the job. It echoed. Deep, wide, personal. And for the first time, the company wasn't afraid of getting sued. They were afraid of being remembered as the place that couldn't recognize the man who built it even when he was standing right in front of them. That week, Carla updated the onboarding manual. First line now read, "Everyone who walks in is somebody, treat them accordingly. Apologies are easy. Reflection is not. But some silences aren't empty. They're heavy, weighted with every missed chance, every judgment, every moment someone chose ego over empathy." And the quiet that followed Tyler's visits was louder than any speech ever could have been. Apologies are easy. Reflection is not. But some silences aren't empty. They're heavy, weighted with every missed chance, every judgment, every moment someone chose ego over empathy. And the quiet that followed Tyler's visits was louder than any speech ever could have been. Greg couldn't sleep. Not since the bulletin. Not since the photo. Not since he saw his own face in the background of that viral TikTok, looking bored, while the founder of his entire company walked out the front door. At first, it was just embarrassment, the kind that hits your stomach when someone catches you doing something you knew you shouldn't. But that faded, and something worse took its place. Shame. Not the kind you can joke about, the kind that lingers, the kind that wakes you at 3 a.m. With your own voice echoing, "You might want to move up front. Don't sit in prime booths if you ain't got prime spending." He had said those words, out loud, to that man. Greg sat at his kitchen table, cold pizza on the counter, laptop open to an HR document he couldn't bring himself to fill out. A resignation form, half completed, name typed, reason left blank. He didn't know if quitting would fix anything, but staying felt dishonest. He thought back to every interaction. How many people had he treated just like Tyler? How many customers did he overlook simply because they didn't look right? How many resumes had he tossed because of a name he didn't know how to pronounce? How many second chances had he withheld? And how many compliments had he only given upward, never sideways, never down? The guilt didn't come in one big moment. It came in waves. A memory here, a joke there, a shrug, a scoff, a quick, "He's probably just..." He finished the sentence in his head. Just another nobody. But Tyler had never been nobody. He was just silent. And silence had been his greatest disguise. Greg wanted to reach out, write an email, apologize, offer to fix something, anything. But what do you say to a man who gave you a career and then showed you, with grace, that you'd failed the test you didn't know you were taking? What do you say to a man you misjudged not once, but repeatedly? There was no subject line strong enough. So he didn't write, he reflected. And for the first time in years, Greg didn't speak during the morning briefing. He just listened, watched the new hires, watched how they were treated, watched how people still defaulted to niceness when the guest wore a Rolex, but neutral when they didn't. It hadn't changed. Not really. But he could. He had to. That night, he pulled out a notebook. Page 1. He wrote, "Things I assumed." He filled it with names, faces, types. The guy with the hoodie. The woman who used food stamps. The teenager with tattoos and a duffel bag. Each one a person Greg had silently, subtly, dismissed. On page 2, he wrote things Tyler did, and under it sat quietly, tipped generously, observed deeply, said nothing, gave everyone a chance. He circled that last one, then stared at it for a long time. Giving everyone a chance. Greg hadn't done that, but maybe, just maybe he could now. Not because he was caught, but because Tyler hadn't punished him. That was what broke Greg the most. The man he disrespected didn't fire him, didn't shame him. He just walked out and left Greg to stand in the wreckage of his own assumptions. True guilt doesn't beg to be forgiven. It asks, what do I become now that I know better? And for the first time in years, Greg didn't want to be in charge. He wanted to be right and kind and better. And maybe that was the beginning. True guilt doesn't beg to be forgiven. It asks, what do I become now that I know better? And for the first time in years, Greg didn't want to be in charge. He wanted to be right and kind and better. And maybe that was the beginning. The next time Tyler came in, he didn't walk alone. He entered quietly. As always, same jacket, same pace, but behind him, a young man carried a folder. No suit, no announcement, just presence. Carla saw it first. She looked at Greg, didn't speak, just nodded toward the floor. Tyler took a seat at the bar. No menu, no phone, just waiting. Greg wiped his palms twice on his apron, then walked forward, slowly. He stopped 3 feet from the man who had, without a word, made him reevaluate everything. Tyler looked up, calm, direct. Greg opened his mouth, then closed it. There was too much to say, and no way to say it all. So he started with what he could manage. I'm sorry. Tyler blinked once. Greg continued. I thought I knew who mattered, who didn't, based on stupid things. Silence. Tyler didn't interrupt, didn't rescue him. Just let the weight of Greg's honesty fill the space. Greg took a breath. You gave me a job I didn't earn, and the chance to show who I was. I failed. Still nothing. Then Tyler tilted his head, just slightly. Not disapproval, not forgiveness. Just listening. Greg reached into his pocket, pulled out a small notebook, opened to a page. These are the names of people I ignored, rushed, treated like background. He slid it across the counter. Tyler didn't touch it, didn't need to. Greg added softly, I don't want to apologize once. I want to do better. Every day. Tyler looked down. Then finally he spoke. You know the difference between regret and responsibility? Greg swallowed, no. Tyler said regret says sorry. Responsibility shows up, every shift, every choice. Pause. And if you're really ready to carry that, you won't need me to come back to check. Then he stood, didn't shake hands, didn't offer absolution, just nodded once, and left. Greg stood still, breathing shallow, but something inside him lifted, not because he'd been forgiven, but because he'd finally faced himself. Later that week, Greg rewrote the staff training guide, not to impress corporate, not to chase headlines, but because he owed it to the people walking through that door every day, the ones without rings, resumes, or recognition. The ones who, like Tyler once did, just wanted a seat and some dignity. Redemption doesn't come with applause. It comes with silence and consistency. But while one man was learning to make it right, another voice, one that had been silent, was about to rise. And this time, it wasn't Tyler's. Redemption doesn't come with applause. It comes with silence and consistency. But while one man was learning to make it right, another voice, one that had been silent, was about to rise. And this time, it wasn't Tyler's. Her name was Rosa, hostess, 32, immigrant, worked every holiday, knew the floor layout better than most managers. For years, she'd stayed quiet, not out of fear, out of strategy. She'd seen what happened to staff who spoke up, hours cut, shifts lost, excuses made. So she stayed in her lane until Tyler walked in that day, again, and this time, she couldn't keep quiet. He sat at table 4, alone. Same jacket, same calm. But something was different. Rosa noticed. The way servers looked away. The way management hovered but never approached. The tension not angry, not loud but anxious. Because now they all knew who he was, but no one had yet said it out loud. Rosa approached with a menu, paused. Then, instead of setting it down and walking away, she did something no one else had done yet. She sat down, across from him, quietly, softly, gently, and said, "They don't deserve you, sir, but I'm glad you came back anyway." Tyler blinked once, then looked at her, truly looked. She continued, "I remember you, not just from last month, from 3 years ago. You came in during Christmas Eve, wore a scarf, tipped me $100 and said nothing. I told my son about you." Pause. "He thinks you're a superhero." Tyler smiled, for the first time, genuinely. Then Rosa added, "I'm not a manager. I don't have power. But if someone's gonna say thank you, let it be me." She stood, turned, faced the room. Everyone looked up. She spoke clearly. "You all laughed, you all whispered, and you all served him like he was nothing. And he still tipped you." Pause. "That's the difference between him and us." The room froze. Managers didn't interrupt. Staff didn't hide. Because there was nothing left to protect. Except the truth. A server near the window began to clap. Slow. Hesitant. Then another. Soon. The room was filled with the quietest applause you've ever heard. Not loud. Not proud. But necessary. Tyler stood. Looked around. Then said softly, "Not necessary." But Rosa replied, "It is. For us. Not for you." That was the moment the culture began to shift. Not from policy, from people. People like Rosa, who had once stayed silent and finally chose to speak. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes, it's about recognition. And when the right people speak up at the right time, a room that once ignored you learns to listen. But could that change last? Beyond applause. That was the next test. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes, it's about recognition. And when the right people speak up at the right time, a room that once ignored you learns to listen. But could that change last? Beyond applause? That was the next test. The week after Rosa spoke, things began to shift, quietly. Not with new policies, not with mandatory trainings, but with choices. Servers started learning names, not just orders. Baristas asked about days, not just drinks. Hosts smiled before checking reservations, and when a guest looked unsure, someone walked over, not because they had to, because they wanted to. At Greg's location, a new sign was taped to the staff door. Simple black font on white paper. You don't need to know who they are to treat them like somebody. No corporate logo, no signature, just the truth. Tips went up, complaints went down, turnover slowed, but most important, the tension lifted, not because Tyler returned, because now his presence wasn't required for people to act right. They had seen the mirror and chosen to keep it up. At a location in Atlanta, a dishwasher who barely spoke English was asked to help train a new hire. When he hesitated, the manager said, "Because you pay attention, and that's leadership." He cried on his lunch break. No one had ever called him that before. In Chicago, a teenage hostess told her team, "My mom says I shouldn't trust people in hoodies." But Rosa trusted a quiet man in a scarf. so I'm gonna trust my own eyes. That night, she helped an unhoused man find a seat, eat a meal, and leave with dignity. He didn't say thank you, didn't need to. The smile said enough. The ripple kept moving, all because one man walked in and said nothing, and one woman chose to say something. Tyler watched it unfold from a distance. He didn't tweet, didn't post, but his team kept track. Weekly reports now included kindness incidents, not just numbers stories, real ones. And the numbers followed anyway. Sales climbed, retention improved. But more than that, people felt good coming to work because they weren't pretending anymore. They were practicing. At the company's next quarterly dinner, no one expected Tyler to attend. He never had before. But 15 minutes after it started, he walked in, no speech, no title badge, just a nod to Rosa seated near the front. And the room rose to its feet, not with applause this time, with respect. Change doesn't arrive with fanfare. It arrives in small, repeated acts. And when enough people choose to treat strangers like stories, not stereotypes, you don't just change a company, you change a culture. Change doesn't arrive with fanfare. It arrives in small, repeated acts. And when enough people choose to treat strangers like stories, not stereotypes, you don't just change a company, you change a culture. But the story doesn't end there, because every time someone hears it, another question quietly appears. Not for Tyler, not for Rosa, not for Greg, for you. What if you were there that day? Would you have judged him by his jacket, rolled your eyes when he asked for water? Would you have smiled only when the tip was big? Would you have called him sir if he wore a suit, or would you have paused, listened, and seen him for who he was, before the world told you? That's the question that stays, the one no policy can answer. Because in every restaurant, every office, every waiting room, someone is watching, someone is wondering if they matter, and someone else you gets to decide if they'll leave believing they don't. Tyler never asked to be seen. He just asked to be treated right, silently, like every person should be. Some stories entertain, others confront. This one doesn't want your praise. It wants your pause. So ask yourself quietly, honestly, what would you have done if he sat at your table? Some stories don't end. They just leave the door slightly open. So the next time you walk into a room, any room, remember the most powerful person there might be the quietest one, not because they need you to notice, but because they're watching how you treat the ones you think don't matter. Tyler never changed the world with a speech. He changed it by walking through it differently, by asking nothing and observing everything. And when the truth revealed itself, he didn't seek revenge. He gave space for people to grow. That's a different kind of power, one most people never recognize until it's too late. So if this story left something with you, a question, a chill, a pause, good, that means you're still listening. And that's where change begins. Because somewhere, maybe right now, someone is walking into your life quietly. No titles, no spotlight, just presence. Will you see them, or will you have to find out the hard way who they really were? The story may be over, but the test never ends. And if you think this story made you pause, wait until you hear about the man who got rejected from his own charity event. See you there.